Greetings. Well, it's that time of the year again. The one pay-per-view that premium live event that everyone talks about every single year, the Royal Rumble. Last year, I did a prediction video without actually watching the show itself. This year, I've thought about doing it again, but there's a reason for why I'm actually going to watch it this year, but there's a lot to talk about with that. But that's not really important right now. Let's do a prediction, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a warning that the latter half of this video is probably going to be a massive rant. So if you're not interested in seeing that, you can go watch someone else's predictions. Anyway, also one more quick note. I got my third vaccine 2 days ago, and I'm still feeling the effects. So if you see me just wriggling my arm a little bit like that, it's because I just want to try and get some feeling back in my arm. But that's not the point. But yeah, so if you see my arm just weirdly moving like that, it's because of that. Anyway, let's dive in. I have a Wikipedia page of the Rumble match card up there. There's only 4 non-Rumble matches, so we'll go through those first. That will be relatively quickly, and then we'll focus most of this video on the Royal Rumble itself. First up, a mixed tag team match. We have Edge and his wife Beth Phoenix taking on Miz and his wife Maurice. This, of course, is the hopeful culmination of a feud that's been going on between the Miz and Edge. They had a match at, I think it was day 1, or it could have been somewhere else, where I think Edge won. I didn't watch day 1. No, anyway, and this has now led to Maurice getting involved, and then Beth Phoenix getting involved. There's been bricks involved, literal bricks being smashed into people's heads. But this has led to this mixed tag match. And I fully believe that, well, Miz and Maurice can afford to lose. Edge still needs a bit of momentum going forward. I think it's pretty safe to assume that Edge and Beth are going to win this match. Then Edge can hopefully move on from this feud. Hopefully to fight with AJ Styles. That's just a thought in my head. But yeah, I'm going for Edge and Beth Phoenix to win. Next up, the Raw Women's Championship is on the line as Becky Lynch defends against Piper Niven. No, I did not read that. I did not say that wrong. Piper Niven. That was her name in NXT UK. That was her name ever since she came to WWE, and she'd already established herself as Piper before she was moved to the main roster where she was given a stupid name as a way of a joke by Eva Marie, and Eva Marie has since been beaten by Piper and has subsequently been released along with several others. But for some fucking reason, she's keeping the stupid name that she was given. And I don't understand why the fuck they would do that. Like, why? Why not get rid of that name and go back to Piper Niven? Or just Piper, because I know Vince loves his one names. It's supposed to be a joke. Why the fuck are we keeping it? Ugh, it's Shorty G all over again. Which I'm glad they realized was stupid and fixed that. Probably gonna have to leave another year with this before we fix this. Also, but yeah, I refuse to use that new name, so I'm just gonna call her Piper. Speaking of which, it's Walter. His name is Walter. He is the longest reigning NXT UK champion of all time. He has been established on NXT as Walter. He's had several fantastic NXT takeover matches. He is Walter. Walter, not some stupid name change that initially had fucking Nazi connotations. It's Walter. Fucking assholes. Anyway, enough of that. As for the match itself, it's pretty much a dead giveaway for me that Becky's going to retain. She's probably not going to lose the title until WrestleMania, and even then, maybe not even there. So yeah, my pick is absolutely going to be Becky Lynch. Moving along, we have our 2 world title matches. I'm going to start with the Universal title match. It's an interesting one, and I'm going to discuss a little bit why it's interesting later on in this video. But first up, we have Roman Reigns versus Seth Rollins for the Universal Championship. I'm going to be discussing a little bit closer why I'm a bit more about this later, but I'm just going to get this one quickly out of the way because it ties into the next match. I believe that Roman Reigns is retaining this championship. And that's all I'm going to be saying about it. I could be wrong. I've heard some rumors that it's going to be Seth. But I am sticking with this one, that Roman is in fact going to retain his championship. Moving along to the WWE Championship match, and it's one of the main reasons I really want to watch this show, not just for the Rumble itself, but because I'm getting a match that most people, and even one of the participants have wanted for ages. It's Brock Lesnar versus Bobby Lashley for the WWE Championship. 2 men who've been compared to each other for ages are finally clashing. It's like Bobby Lashley's been screaming his head off to try and get this match to happen, and it's finally fucking happening. It took him fucking long enough, but it's finally happening. And as for who's going to win, Well, as I say, to tie into the previous match, one rumor that has been persistent, and I'm pretty sure it's been confirmed by how the build-up has been, one match that I think is set in stone for WrestleMania is Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar. And because of that, I don't see Roman Reigns losing that championship. And Brock Lesnar, who wasn't even supposed to be WWE Champion going into this, is going to be the one to lose here, thanks to interference from either Roman or the Usos or something like that. Oh yeah, something I forgot to mention, the Usos are barred from ringside in the Reigns-Rollins match, but I don't think that matters, personally. So yeah, I'm going to say Bobby Lashley is going to win. Because, quite frankly, I think he needs it more. Brock doesn't need to be champion right now. I think Bobby has a better option. So yeah, I'm going for Bobby Lashley to win the WWE Championship. And yeah, I'll discuss a little bit more about this in a moment. Okay, that is all the undercard matches. It's time for the one that everyone wants to talk about. The Royal Rumble matches. And ever since 2019 onwards, the women's match has usually been in the middle of the card. That's precisely what I'm going to be doing here. I'm going to start with the women's. I have a list here of all the participants that have been announced so far. There's 22, I believe, that has been announced so far for the Women's Rumble. Those are Rhea Ripley, Nikki ASH, Dana Brooke, Carmella, Selena Vega, Tamina, Shotzi, Natalya, Aaliyah, Naomi, Shayna Baszler, Bianca Belair, Liv Morgan, Nikki and Brie Bella, Lita, Michelle McCool, Kelly, Summer Rae, Sasha Banks, and Sonya Deville. The last 2 being announced just recently on SmackDown, so I'm really glad I didn't do this prediction video before SmackDown. Because there were rumors that Sasha was injured and wasn't going to make the Rumble, but now she is, and Sonya has also announced herself for the Rumble. Now, for those of you who might have looked at the list, might have noticed I left out two specific names from this, and one is because I wanted to mention something very special about this entry, and the other because it's a major talking point that I'm going to be discussing later on. But the special entry that I'm talking about is that, well, as I mentioned, there were a bunch of there's always a bunch of legends being in Rumbles usually, and this year's no different as they brought in a few of them. People like Nikki and Brie Bella, who are Hall of Famers, Michelle McCool, Kelly, and Summer Rae, who are well known, and Lita, who's actually gotten a bit more attention on the road into the Rumble. So, she's worth discussing a little bit later. But one name that was announced that was very interesting was Mickie James. Now, Mickie James is no longer with WWE after being released a couple of months ago. And she was released in pretty weird fashions, with her belongings being sent to her in a trash bag, which caused a massive incident. But she is, in fact, going to be in this Rumble. And what's interesting is that Mickie James is currently working for Impact Wrestling and is their Knockouts champion. And for those who don't know, the Knockouts champion is basically their version of the women's title. But Mickie James is the current Impact champion, and she was referred to as much when she was announced for the Rumble. So, WWE is actually having a working relationship with Impact Wrestling. Never thought I'd see today, huh? Anyway, yeah. But, now it's time to talk about the other one. Now it's time to talk about the other name I left out, because it's kind of a talking point that I want to bring up. It's one that has been a massive contributing factor to why I both wanted to and not wanted to watch the Rumble this year. It's not just her though, it's more people. Charlotte Flair is the current SmackDown Women's Champion. And you may have noticed she doesn't have a match for her SmackDown Women's title on the card. That's because she's not in a title match. She already has a match. She has entered herself into the Royal Rumble. That, of course, has marked a major talking point, especially because of our current champions on the men's side. And I want to get into that, but I feel it's unfair to do that before I discuss the winners of the Rumble. But I'm going to be straight up front here. Charlotte, I don't believe she's going to win, and even if I did, I'd be highly against it. I do not want Charlotte to win this Rumble, ever. If she's going to do that, I would have her do some sort of house show and drop the SmackDown Women's title at some point. Then I'd be okay with her winning, but otherwise, no. No, no, no. I'll come back to this later. But let's talk about potential winners. Now, I'm going to just mention the names that I think have potentials to win this Rumble out of the names that have been announced. My current list of people that I think could win this Rumble are Bianca Belair, Naomi, Sasha Banks, and Lita. Why? Well, Bianca Belair and Becky Lynch have sort of been going a bit back and forth, and not really gotten and Bianca's not really gotten a proper revenge match since SummerSlam, where she was beaten in a squash match. Sorry. So I could easily see her winning and not winning Rumbles back to back. And then go on to face Becky at WrestleMania. Naomi has been a major talking point because of her feud with Sonya Deville, and on the recent SmackDown, she finally got the one-up on Sonya by beating her in a match. But Sonya then announced that she's entering herself into the Rumble to try and stop her. But this could be a way for Naomi to not only get one more up on Sonya, but also win in the eyes of the fan, and also gain momentum, bounce off this momentum of this feud and move on to really spite Sonya by not only getting the best of her, but also getting to the top of the women's division by winning the SmackDown Women's title at WrestleMania. Sasha Banks recently returned, and there's a very good chance she could possibly win the match after this surprise announcement of her return. I could very easily see her winning and going to challenge Charlotte at WrestleMania to have a proper one-on-one match between the two of them at WrestleMania. But the one that's gotten the most attention is Lita, the Hall of Famer who returned and announced herself, who was announced into the Rumble, and she claims that she has one more run in her, and she even had a promo battle with the current SmackDown Women's Champion Charlotte. So speculation have been that maybe she could win the Rumble and go on to face Charlotte at WrestleMania. I personally feel like that's not that likely. I feel the more likely scenario is that you could have Lita eliminate Charlotte from the Rumble and then face her either at WrestleMania or before that, at some point. Because, as Charlotte pointed out, she was the one to have a retirement match with Trish Stratus, so potentially Charlotte could have another retirement match with Lita, even though I'm pretty sure they're probably going to show up in the Rumbles again anyway. But one thing I've neglected to mention about this whole scenario, whole thing, is of course the missing 8 people who haven't been announced for the Rumble yet. Those could be surprises, they could be just NXT call-ups, it could be anything. But there are 3 names in particular that I want to talk about that have been heavily rumored for this Rumble. 2 of which are injured superstars coming back, and one is someone who hasn't stepped in the ring for quite some time. Let's start with the first one. That being a woman who's been out with injury for quite a long time, but could potentially make her return to the Rumble, that being Bayley. She got injured not too long after WrestleMania 37, I don't entirely know how long, but she was out potentially for a very long time. I don't exactly know the extent of her injury. I think maybe it was either a hand or a shoulder injury, I'm not entirely sure what it was. It was a knee injury, wasn't it? Yeah, it was a knee injury. She's been out for a while, but she could potentially return here, but I'm not exactly liking her chances to win the Rumble. I don't see her coming back as a face, probably, and both of our current women's champions are heels, so yeah, I don't really see Bayley winning the Rumble. Another potential is another woman who's been injured, and that's Asuka. She went off the TV after Money in the Bank to have her teeth fixed after they were knocked out by Shayna Baszler at one point. And when she posted a picture of herself at the dentist office on Twitter, her arm was in a cast. So she was out with some sort of undisclosed arm injury. But it's been heavily rumored that she's been cleared to compete, and I have every confidence that she will in fact show up in the Rumble tonight. Will she win? Well, I'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's not unlikely. And finally, the big rumor, the one that's been circulating recently this week, is that one name that's been floating around is a woman who hasn't been in the company since 2019, ever since her loss in the main event of WrestleMania. I'm talking about Ronda Rousey. Ronda Rousey left WWE and I guess wrestling altogether. Either because she was fed up with things, as she has publicly stated that she absolutely hated being in the wrestling business because of the fans, despite the fact that she was causing a lot of the issues herself and issues herself or from the bookings. So you can't blame the fans for that one. That's on you or on the company. Then again, that's with pretty much everything. Don't blame the fans, blame the creative. Hey. Anyway, the other, of course, being that she wanted to start a family, which, of course, she now has. She has a baby. I don't know anything about said baby other than it exists. But it's been 5 months since that happened, so chances are she could maybe appear. I don't see that as... However, when I read about that, apparently this child came into being only 5 months ago. And to me, that's not exactly a long time now, is it? A long time. And that to me says that she's probably going to be out longer. I mean, hell, when Becky got pregnant, she was out for over a year. Taking care of her kid. I don't see Ronda just coming back after such a short amount of time and leaving her child behind. So I'm not very confident about Ronda actually showing up. It could happen, definitely, and if it does, there's a very good chance she would win to set up a proper one-on-one match between her and Becky at WrestleMania. But I'm less confident in this one, so I don't see that happening. Well, I've gone through all of it. I think it's time that we start talking about who I'm actually picking. And for those of you who don't know, when it comes to the Royal Rumble, because there are 30 entrants, I think it's so difficult to predict that I usually say that I'm going to just have 3 picks. If either of them win, I get a point. So, my 3 picks. I'm going to say that last year I said specifically I don't believe Bianca Belair is going to win. I don't see that happening. I was dead wrong. She ended up winning the whole damn thing. So, I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'm going to make Bianca Belair my number 1 pick. I'm not super confident in that one, but I'm just going to make sure I don't screw things up. Not this time. I'm going to pick Bianca and make sure that it is in fact my pick. The next pick, after this, I was really torn on whether or not to choose Sasha Banks or Naomi, but I thought about it and I think ultimately I'm going to take a risk here on recency bias and think that her feud with Sonya isn't enough to truly propel her to win it. So I'm going to say Sasha Banks for my second pick. And my third pick, like last year, I'm going to make it a heart vote. Like, it has nothing to do with what I think is going to happen. It has nothing to do with how things have been playing out on TV. It is purely something, purely a vote with my heart because I want this person to win. And while I think this person will be in the Rumble, her chances of winning aren't exactly there. I'm talking about Asuka. It's long been a wish of mine to correct a mistake that happened at WrestleMania 34. For those of you who don't remember, at WrestleMania 34, Asuka, the Royal Rumble winner from that year, ended up challenging Charlotte for the SmackDown Women's title at WrestleMania. She lost not only the match, but her winning streak. And since then, and after that, she basically spiraled down. She did end up winning the women's title a couple of times. But her first title win ended with her losing the title 2 weeks before WrestleMania 35 to Charlotte. And then she was dumped on the pointless pre-show battle royal on the pre-show. Then WrestleMania 36 came. Then WrestleMania 36 came along, and she was the women's tag team champion, alongside Kairi Sane, and she and Kairi lost their titles to Alexa and Nikki. Then comes WrestleMania 37, and she is the Raw Women's Champion going into it, and she loses to Rhea Ripley. So yeah, her track record at WrestleMania has been pretty damn bad, and most of her title reigns have had her either be relegated to the background thanks to Charlotte, or she's been left off the card, or she hasn't gotten any credible wins going for her. It is, in my mind, completely bullshit that she's being treated like this. And it all stems from that fucking loss to Charlotte. To me, I want WWE to correct that mistake. It might just be a short-term thing, but damn it, I just want Asuka to win at WrestleMania at least once, and what better win than beating Charlotte for the SmackDown Women's title. I'm picking Asuka purely for a heart vote because I want her to go on to WrestleMania to beat Charlotte clean as a fucking whistle. Anyway, that's the Women's Rumble done. Sorry about that cut. The batteries on my camera was about to run out, so I had to cut this one for later because I have a lot to talk about now. But first of all, let's finish things up with the Men's Rumble. Let's talk about all the participants who've been announced so far. There are 25 participants so far. We have Angelo Dawkins, Montez Ford, Rey and Dominic Mysterio, Austin Theory, Sheamus, Damian Priest, the current United States Champion, AJ Styles, Big E, Happy Corbin, Madcap Moss, Sami Zayn, Kofi Kingston, Kevin Owens, Omos, Randy Orton, Riddle, Chad Gable, Otis, Dolph Ziggler, Robert Roode, Shinsuke Nakamura, Rick Boogs, Shinsuke, current Intercontinental Champion, and Ricochet. Also, forgot to mention, a special celebrity entrant, Jackass's own Johnny Knoxville, who's been having a feud with Sami Zayn ever since he announced himself for the Rumble. Obviously, I don't believe Johnny or Sami are going to win this Rumble, so we can cross those out immediately. Now, looking at the landscape here, who has the best chance of winning? Well, there are two names that spring out immediately, at least in my mind. Like, people have been talking about these two specifically, that Big E or Kevin Owens could win, depending on who wins the Universal Championship match. Originally, people were talking about whether or not Big E could win and challenge Bobby Lashley for the WWE title. But they recently moved. But on the last episode of SmackDown, they moved Big E over to SmackDown. So to me, it seems like they have plans for him on SmackDown. I don't know if that is the SmackDown Tag Team titles, or if they're planning on having him win and challenge Roman. I don't know. But that seems weird, though, to do that. So I feel like this move to SmackDown has basically made the chances of him actually winning the Rumble significantly go down the drain for me. Unless they have finally decided not to have Brock and Roman fight. I don't know if that's the case or not, but we'll see. We'll see. Kevin Owens is more likely though if things go the opposite of what I thought, what I predicted, and Seth Rollins becomes the Universal Champion. And since he has a partnership with Kevin Owens these days, if Kevin were to win the Rumble, you could blow that feud off with the championship match at WrestleMania. Seems likely. So I'm gonna make Kevin Owens my first official pick of the Rumble winners. After that, it becomes a bit less certain. I had Big E down until his recent move to SmackDown, but now I'm really uncertain because if things go the way I think they're going, and Roman remains champion, but they're still planning on doing him and Brock at Mania, then where does that leave Big E? Like, what would be the point of him challenging Bobby Lashley then if they decide to move him to SmackDown just now? Like, what would be the point of moving him to SmackDown if you were just going to have him challenge Bobby Lashley for the title? So that makes no sense. So I feel like Big E has to be the choice. I feel like Big E can't really be a choice anymore. I don't think that makes any sense. However, that brings me to two other possibilities. And before I continue with my official picks, I feel like time has come for me to start my little rant. Well, it's probably not going to be little, but let's talk about it. I've been alluding to this throughout the entire video, that there's something I want to talk about, and I think now's the time. And it all started with that stupid fucking Day 1 pay-per-view. So, at Day 1, originally we had 2 world title matches scheduled for that show. It was going to be Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns round 2 for the Universal Championship after their match at Crown Jewel, I want to say. Or was it Super Showdown? I don't know what these Saudi shows are called anymore. Anyway, meanwhile, Big E was defending his WWE Championship in a Fatal 4-Way match against Kevin Owens, Seth Rollins, and Bobby Lashley. However, Roman Reigns then ended up in a COVID-19 situation, and I think it must have been that he was in contact with someone who had it because he came back relatively quickly afterwards, so he couldn't possibly have been hit by it. So that match was cancelled, and instead Brock was inserted into the WWE title match, making it a Fatal 5-Way. And Brock ended up winning, pinning Big E. So Brock Lesnar is now the WWE Champion. Roman Reigns is still the Universal Champion. And because Brock has this free agent clause in his contract, he can now move between shows. And has insinuated a match with Roman Reigns at WrestleMania while they are both still champions. Couple that with the fact that Charlotte just entered herself into the Royal Rumble, and it got people talking that maybe WWE were planning on unifying these championships and killing the brand split. Now, rumors since then have disputed this and said that is not planned at all. There is no plan to do that. And that all the signs indicate that either of the world champions will at least one of the world champions will lose their respective championships at the pay-per-view. I am hoping, really hoping, that these reports are true and that my fears are for naught. Because if you couldn't tell by how I'm speaking about this decision, if it were to happen, would not be something I'd be happy about. In fact, I'm very much of the opinion that despite the fact that they've released a bunch of superstars, WWE's roster is still too bloated and too big to be contained on one show. Which would essentially be the case because the reason I don't want this to happen is because I know what WWE is like when there is only one world title and the brand split is dead. Because they've done it before in 2013. And to me, and while I skipped out on WWE in 2014, mostly because I had been growingly less interested in WWE's product leading up to it, and then when the streak was ended, I said, fuck this, I'm out. I left for an entire year and then came back after WrestleMania 31, enjoyed myself, and wanted to watch regularly. That might have been a mistake, because the programming was dreadfully dull. And it mostly had to do with the fact that SmackDown was a nothing show, all the attention was on Raw, and most of the storylines, and if I didn't enjoy a storyline, well, tough shit, there's no alternative other than watching NXT, which wasn't as big as it became a little bit later. It was still great television, but still, it was still a few years off of its heyday. And WWE must have known that it wasn't working because the non-brand split period lasted from TLC 2013 till 2016, leading up to SummerSlam, when they split the brands again. They brought in a new World Championships chip that we now know as the Universal Title, and we've been on that road ever since, from 2016 till now. 6 years. Over twice the length of the non-brand split period. And that's kind of how it is for WWE, because I think they realize what some fans don't. And while normally I don't blame fans, but to me, people who think that ending the brand split is something that they want to see, I don't get it. Did none of you watch during the points where there was no brand split? Because that was not a good period. And it was mostly because SmackDown was a recap show, all the focus was on Raw, and if Raw sucked, which it usually does because, 3 hours of programming, well, now we have a stretched storyline, and then we get to SmackDown, we have to see reruns, either see reruns from Raw, or test matches that ultimately mean nothing because they're just testing the waters, and then they're doing the exact same match on Raw. I got a taste of just how, and of the fact that this will be just as bad when shit like the the lead up to WrestleMania 35 happened when Becky, Ronda, and Charlotte took over every damn segment on the show. On both sides of the coin, and I actively hated that match because of it, and boycotted it when I watched WrestleMania 35, purely because I hated the fact that I hated the fucking build up, and how it went in a direction I hated. Specifically the fact that they did not need the SmackDown Women's title in there, as was proven later, because only a month after Becky became Becky Two Belts, Charlotte won the title back immediately, and we were back to normal. But then they introduced shit like the wild card rule, and the brand to brand invitational. It was stupid. And ultimately was something that nobody enjoyed. Every single fan screamed that this was a dumb idea and they should just toss it in the trash. And I agree. From day one, I thought the wildcard rule was terrible because, again, it just took away spots from people, and it basically made the shows worse, especially because of the shitty rules that they implemented. And ultimately, WWE had to agree and scrapped the whole damn thing. The brand-to-brand invitational thing is still dumb, but at least it's less frequent than the stupid wildcard rule. But it just goes to show that when WWE can't just keep the brand split going, the programming gets worse. Why do you think it took no time at all after WCW went under for WWE to implement the brand split? It was because when WCW went under, their roster expanded tremendously after they brought in a bunch of people, and they needed space for them because cramming them all on one show didn't work. So they brought them in, started the brand split in 2002, and it lasted. Well, actually, the brand split had started a little bit earlier. I think in 2001, I want to say, or 2000, I'm not entirely sure. No, 2001 has to be. But initially, they only had one. They had the undisputed title being on both shows. But again, that only lasted a year before they brought in a second world title and made the shows as separate as they could. And it lasted all the way till 2013. They started having basically no brand split in 2012, but they still had both world titles and stuff like that, so they could still keep things going like that. That's not the case anymore. Like that. But that wasn't the case after things went under. After things went towards hell at TLC. Now, I'm rambling a lot. But it's only because in recent time, as you may have noticed, I haven't covered a lot of WWE. Like WrestleMania 37 was probably the last time I covered anything relating to WWE. And it's mostly because I've been so damn burned out by shit that WWE has done. Now, some of the times I just didn't want to watch a pay-per-view because, life got in the way. But recently I've just thought, well, I have time now, but do I really want to watch it? No. I barely pay attention to what's going on Raw or SmackDown these days because I don't really care. And that has been amplified by all these insinuations of ending the brand split, which will only cause more problems than it would solve. That's a line I've used many times, but I have a question for you guys. And I genuinely want an answer. What problems would ending the brand split solve? What's the benefit? And don't just say, oh, it doesn't make sense to have two world titles. Why not? 2 shows. You want us to keep them as separate as possible? Why not have 2 world titles? Make them as separate as possible. But then again, forgetting that, that doesn't really fix anything. If anything, it just makes storylines overlap on 2 shows, and thereby taking away time for other matches and feuds that could be building elsewhere. And if you're saying AEW does the exact same thing, if you want to bring that up, Rampage is not that long. And usually they do. They might announce that something is going to happen on Rampage, on Dynamite, or vice versa. But so does Raw and SmackDown. They mention shit that's going to happen on the other show. But they don't have it overlap for long. Like, they don't do the same match on Rampage that they did on Dynamite, unless it's part of a longer feud. And even then, I don't think I've ever seen that happening. But essentially, that's a car alarm. The things would be much worse if you had a 2-hour show that would essentially be a recap of a 3-hour show, or a testing ground for a 3-hour show. What would be the benefit? What's the benefit of ending the brand split? There isn't. It would just cause worse television for me. I'm guessing maybe that some of the people who want this are people who grew up during the Attitude Era or stuff like that. We're used to being into, one show, one world title, all that jazz. But WWE's roster was smaller back then. A lot smaller. And it only ballooned as time went on, and they realized they had to have the brand split. Now, I know the initial thought was they needed internal competition because their actual competition had been bought out. But really, it's more of a managing issue and more of a way to keep things going. And to me, ending the brand split won't help. Even though WWE has competition these days, well, I don't see why they need to make the product, how ending the brand split will make them better competition. If anything, I think it makes them worse, because now it seems like they're just doing what AEW does rather than sticking to their guns and making the show more slightly different. It's like on AEW you have one roster on one show, but a few people get some time to shine here and there on smaller shows like Dark or Dark Elevation or Rampage. Whereas on WWE, you have 2 separate shows with 3 separate shows with separate rosters and stuff like that. And while ideally they would be booked to feel like different shows, at least you get different stuff every now and then, even if it feels similar. And it gives you a reason to watch what WWE does, also see what they do differently across every show. I'm rambling a lot, but that's only because this situation both makes me angry and tired at the same time. And there's even a part of me that thinks you're overreacting because it's not happening. I'm seeing so many people thinking that that's going to happen, and I'm so worried that they're right. I just don't want to see it happen. I don't want in any way for this stupid ass idea that the brand split is ending to happen. Because it's something I don't want to see happen ever. And it's coming at a time when my enjoyment of WWE is at an all-time low. And I've had this experience before. As I mentioned, 2013. My enjoyment of WWE had been drastically going down throughout the entire year. Ending the brand split was a massive hit for me. And then when the streak ended at WrestleMania 30, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Here, ending the brand split is no longer a massive blow. That would be more of the releases or Walter or NXT 2.0. Like, there's still good stuff in NXT 2.0, but that was a change that did not need to happen. I feel like ending the brand split would be the straw this time. I would just disassociate myself from it entirely. I don't see why I would ever come back. Which is why I'm going into this Rumble with a mindset. Brock Lesnar or Roman Reigns, either one, both if you want, need to lose. One of them needs to lose. My hope is that it's Brock Lesnar, but hey, if Roman Reigns were to lose the title to Seth Rollins, that'd be good too. And Charlotte needs to be eliminated from the Women's Rumble. Because that would dispel all fears that I have that WWE are going to do something incredibly fucking stupid. But of course, that ties me a bit back to the Men's Rumble. Because as I mentioned, the whole thing about Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns, there's been a thought that maybe Brock or Roman, depending on who loses their championship, can enter the Rumble and win it and challenge the other for the world title. It's certainly a possibility, but it's one I don't think is needed. They've already been feuding for quite a while. I feel like if they announce that that's going to be the match of Mania, I don't think people would object too much. Like, they don't want... Like, I am not one who wants to see that match because I've seen Brock and Roman fight way too much already. Especially at WrestleMania. But hey, if they're just fucking stubborn and want to do this, fine. Do that. Whatever, as long as it's only for one world title and the other one is elsewhere being defended by someone else. Be it Kevin Owens, as has been one of my picks. Be it Big E, who I initially had as one of my picks, but now I feel like that might not be a good idea. Hell, for fuck's sake, I'd be okay if Johnny Knoxville ended up winning the fucking Rumble, because at least then, you know that they can't just do something stupid like having that title for title match if Johnny Knoxville is challenging for the title or something like that. I really don't want to say Roman or Brock because I just don't feel like it's necessary. But as for who else? Some people have been throwing out the idea of AJ Styles, mostly as a hard pick because they really want AJ to win. Some people have thrown out Finn Balor, but recent reports suggest that Vince McMahon doesn't care about Finn Balor. Some people have thrown out maybe NXT champion Braun Breaker, or Braun Steiner as I like to call him, because, he's Steiner in everything. Every damn thing. Like entrance music, moveset, gear, speech pattern, and blood. But the name is not Steiner. Even though it should be. It should be Braun Steiner. Hell, they've even acknowledged that he is the son of Rick Steiner. And yet, for some... This is not supposed to be a rant about 2.0. I'm sorry. This whole situation is really grinding my gears a bit. But I need to make a decision. 3 picks for the Rumble. I've been ranting a long time now, and I think it's time that I put this to an end. And I need to make a decision. So I'm going to say my number 1 pick is going to be Kevin Owens. Because that's the only one that somewhat makes sense. Even, like, if I'm wrong about my decision, okay, whatever. One name I want to throw out there, and I've kind of grown on the idea a bit, but I'm not entirely sure if I want to go for it, is Riddle. Riddle could win the Rumble, Randy could win the title from whoever's holding it, and those two go into WrestleMania to feud, breaking up RK Bro and making it into a match. That's a fun idea, but I have no faith in that. Austin Theory has been presented as Vince McMahon's chosen recently, so hey, what if he were to win the Rumble? Get a rocket strapped to him, that's a possibility. But you know what, I am so torn and I don't know what to pick right now. So you know what, I'm just going to say this, mostly because I have no other option. I'm going to pick Kevin Owens, even though I don't believe Seth Rollins will be champion coming out of this. If he is, then him and Kevin Owens at WrestleMania does make sense. I'm going to agree with the people about AJ Styles, mostly because he could deserve it. And hey, AJ Styles versus Bobby Lashley at WrestleMania sounds like a cool match. Why not? I mean, Bobby Lashley has been teetering on a face turn. Or AJ's full-on face, I think, maybe. Who knows? And finally, maybe I should go for Big E as well. I don't know. I don't know if I should go for Big E. There's no one on NXT I really think could win right now. I was about to make a bit of a weird choice, because some rumors have been stating that The Undertaker is going to be in the area. He's probably just there to cheer on his wife, to support for his wife, who's going to be in the Women's Rumble. But what if? What if I'm right, and what if he shows up in the Rumble, making that video I made about The Undertaker's retirement thing? I made that video before his final farewell at Survivor Series, and even then, even after all this time, I'm still not entirely convinced that he is done. I feel like somehow, some way, he's going to get the bug, he's going to be back in there. What if he shows up to this event? Here's the crowd as they're cheering on for as he's watching his wife in the Rumble, and he suddenly gets the bug and thinks, Vince, I want to be at WrestleMania for one more match in front of the crowd. I'm just saying, it's a possibility. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's a thought. But you know what? I officially decided I'm not gonna take that risk and pick The Undertaker to win the Rumble. No, I'm just gonna go back to the original plot. Even though that trade to SmackDown has maybe so little confidence in it, I'm gonna say Big E. So after a long rant, I can finally tell you that my 3 picks for the Men's Rumble are Kevin Owens, AJ Styles, and Big E. And that brings my long prediction / rant video to an end. And to finally summarize my predictions, I'm saying Beth Phoenix and Edge to win, Becky Lynch to retain, Roman Reigns to retain, Bobby Lashley to become WWE Champion. My 3 picks for the Women's Rumble are Bianca Belair, Sasha Banks, and Asuka. And my 3 picks for the Men's Rumble are Kevin Owens, AJ Styles, and Big E. Okay, that's it. I'll see you later tonight, or tomorrow, whatever you want to call it, for my thoughts on the 2022 Royal Rumble.